Jessica at AARP Texas, and I am pleased that AARP is a proud sponsor of the Striking a Balance Caregiver Conference. As a sponsor, we hope that you are gaining new insights into family caregiving and that you have the opportunity to connect with other caregivers and experts on aging. Family caregiving is a priority for AARP. It is essential to our work today, but that's not all. AARP is doing amazing things to make life better for the age 50+ populations and the generations to follow. We help improve their financial well-being and their health. We want people to contribute to society and local communities and to fully enjoy life. Some of you may already know that AARP has a strong presence throughout Texas in many communities in this great state, including Austin, the capital city where I live and work. Again, this year, AARP Texas is bringing opportunities to our members and others through virtual events, just like this one that we're participating in today. We hope you have the opportunity to enjoy these free offerings. Not only are there programs to help unpaid family caregivers, but there are presentations to help people avoid being victims of fraud. We host fitness seminars and we work with city leaders towards making this an even more age-friendly community. And know this, volunteers are critical for our mission. There are many opportunities for those who can give a little time to volunteer. You can learn more about these local happenings at aarp.org/tx or find us at the AARP Texas Facebook page. But again, of course, family caregiving is a priority. There are 48 million family caregivers in the US, 3.4 million in Texas alone. They provide help to loved ones, usually a parent, spouse, or sibling. Caregiving can be anything from driving a loved one to a doctor's appointment, making sure bills are paid, cleaning the house, or helping bathe and dress, and many caregivers do fairly complex medical tasks. Caregivers come from every generation, from Gen Z to the silent generation, and every racial and ethnic group. And you know, most of us will either be a caregiver or need care at some point during our lives. AARP recently released new research on how much family caregivers spend out of their own pockets to care for a loved one. We found that almost every caregiver spends money on caregiving, and about 8 in 10 routinely spend their own money on caregiving. The average amount that caregivers spend each year is $7,240. That's more than a fourth of their household income on average. Housing expenses like rent or mortgage payments, assisted living, and home modifications make up more than half of caregiver spending, followed by medical expenses. Caregivers also experience indirect financial setbacks, often postponing their own personal savings for retirement. But I am here to tell you there's action that can help. Congress is considering a bipartisan bill called the Credit for Caring Act, which would create a tax credit of up to $5,000 for working family caregivers. This could help offset some of those major expenses that we know caregivers are facing. AARP, along with 80 other organizations, endorse the Credit for Caring Act. Family caregivers are the backbone of our long-term care system, but they are breaking under the pressure. Creating a tax credit for family caregivers is one way that Congress can help. If you would like to learn more about the Credit for Caring Act, visit aarp.org/caregiving. There, you will also find many resources available for family caregivers just like you. So again, that's aarp.org/caregiving. Thank you for listening. Again, I'm Jessica Lemon with AARP Texas, and thank you.
All right, thank you so much, Jessica, and thank you for joining us this morning. I'm Rob Fabian with Age of Central Texas, and along with our partners at the Area Agency on Aging for the Capital Area, we are so glad that you are a part of our second day of the 20th anniversary of the Striking a Balance Caregiver Conference. Now, this is the longest running and largest single caregiver conference in Central Texas. And we are very proud to have partnered with the Area Agency on Aging to bring you this conference for the past 20 years. And we're very glad that you're with us this morning. We have an amazing presentation. Before we get started, just a few very simple housekeeping things to go over. Number one, we are recording this session. So if for any reason you have a technical issue on your side, you get knocked off, you need to leave early for any reason, don't worry, we're recording the session and it will be available later this week on our YouTube channel. At the end of the week, we're going to send you links to all of the presentations so that you can have those to go back, watch them again, or share them with family and friends. Number two, we sent you the program for this year's conference. We hope that you take a look at that because there's some great information in there, not only about all of our presenters and our wonderful sponsors, but there's also some great caregiver resources that we have put together for you. So be sure and take a look at the program. Then also right down here at the bottom of your screen, you have a chat feature. It looks like one of those thought bubbles that you see in the comic strips. We want you to click on that. And during today's presentation, we want you to ask your questions. Type in your questions and your comments into the chat, because when we're finished with the presentation this morning, we're going to answer all of your questions. Now, remember, we bring you this conference for you. This is your opportunity to ask your questions of the experts that we have brought together for this year's conference. So please take advantage of this opportunity. Ask those questions while we have these amazing experts here with us today. Then finally, at the end of the week, we're going to send you an electronic survey. And we ask you to please take just a couple of minutes, that's all it'll take, just 2 minutes to fill out the survey. It's very important for us because it helps us plan for next year. In fact, every single presentation that you're enjoying this year, we put together based on your responses to last year's surveys. So tell us, what are some of the issues that you're going through in your journey? What are some of the topics that you would like us to address next year so that we have a great idea for putting together the 21st anniversary? Lastly, Jessica mentioned that a quote that is attributed to Rosalind Carter, who started the Carter Caregiving Institute in Georgia. And Rosalind has that famous quote that says there's 4 kinds of people in the world. There are those who are caregivers, those who have been caregivers, those who will be caregivers, and those who are being cared for. I bring that up because today is Rosalind Carter's 95th birthday. So we wish her a very happy birthday, and we're very grateful for not only everything that she does, but everything that she and her husband have done for their communities. So it is my pleasure to welcome Nancy Turco with us today. For those of you who have been to our Striking a Balance conferences in the past, you know that whenever we have Nancy as one of our speakers, that session is always just packed to the gills. And Nancy is just an amazing expert. We're so glad she's joining us again today. She is a dementia care expert. She's worked with dementia, people living with dementia and their families for more than 25 years. Music therapy is one of her big areas of expertise. As you can see, those gorgeous guitars that are behind her. In addition, she writes jingles. She's written a lot of jingles for both KVET and Clear Channel Radio. She also has a series of exercise videos and music videos for older adults. She is a facilitator of a monthly support group for families supporting loved ones living with Alzheimer's. She's facilitated many workshops, seminars, conferences all over the nation for families and for those who are living with dementia. And she also works a lot with nurses, social workers, and activity directors throughout the region to help them understand how best to serve those that are living with dementia. She's also an ambassador for the Alzheimer's Association. Nancy, we are so grateful to have you back with us again today. And we're so looking forward to your expertise on how can we engage our loved ones who are living with dementia in meaningful activities. So Nancy, I'm turning it over to you.
Thank you. Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. And it's a real privilege to be able to share information on activities with all of you. You know, I have, like Rob said, I've been working, well, now it's over 30 years, I guess you would say, and I'm still learning. I learn something every day, and I've learned what works well most of the time, what works well sometimes, and especially what practically never works. So I'd like to give you some insight into the disease and what the Alzheimer's patient is experiencing, and give you some tools so that you will have a rewarding experience, whether you're a personal caregiver or whether you're an activity person or whether, you know, your loved one has dementia. And just so you know too, I will interchange the dementia, Alzheimer's, I know is one type of it. So sometimes I'll say dementia and sometimes Alzheimer's, but I would like to say that they're all all conclusive. So there was a story about a couple that went to the doctor and they were having trouble remembering things. So the doctor told them to write things down and that would help them. So the husband said to his wife that evening, "Can you get me a snack?" She said, "What do you want?" He said, "Oh, I don't know, potato chips or something, or ice cream." And she said, "You better write it down." And he said, "No, I don't need to write it down." And she said, "I know I'll remember." So he said, "Well, I would like whipped cream and banana and cherries with ice cream." And a while later, she came back with 2 plates of bacon and eggs. And he said, "You know, you forgot the toast." So I will be giving examples of people with dementia that I met. And I want to say up front, I mean no disrespect. You really have to keep your sense of humor through all of this. And sometimes a specific example that you hear will stick with you better than reading something in a book or a manual. So as one of our residents said one day, "Oh, honey, I can't wait for this to be over. It's boring. I can't wait to go home." And the other lady said, "Yeah, me neither." So, all righty. Well, now think about this. Today for many is the first day of school. I know my grandkids are going today for the first day of school. Well, the first day of school, imagine that that's every day of your life. And you would think things like, what time will I go home? Where should I sit? Who are all these strangers? Is this a friend or not? What time's lunch? What's for lunch? Do I have to eat all my lunch? What if I don't like it? Where do I sit? I'm thirsty. Where's the water fountain? Where's my brother? Where's my sister, my mom? Am I spending the night? Where are all the things I came in with today? Are we going to do something fun? What's the point? I'm scared, I'm cold, I'm lonely, I'm warm, and my feet hurt, and my new shoes don't fit quite right. My shirt's scratchy, pants are tight. Where's the bathroom? What if I can't get my slacks down and I have an accident? And who's picking me up? What time? Where am I? And what way do I go to find my classroom? Well, a local doctor here told me that with people with Alzheimer's, every single day is the first day of school. So keeping that in mind, the 4 A's of dementia, basically the first A is amnesia. And that's when a person can't remember a recent conversation. They'll say, "You took my car," or "Who took my purse?" "I had nothing to eat today," or "Am I supposed to be there?" And if they insist that they're missing money, allowing them to keep small amounts of money in their pocket or their handbag does help. And if they're also missing any other item, help them look and then distract to something else and try to learn their favorite hiding places, because chances are they are the ones who have hid it. Try not to take anything personal, and a gentle hug or a touch, nonverbal reassurances really help. And one thing that I have stressed many times is saying, "I'm sorry." Well, many times caregivers will say to me, "Well, why do I have to say I'm sorry? I didn't do anything wrong." Well, saying you're sorry does not necessarily mean that you are taking full responsibility. It means that you are sorry that they are having a difficult moment at this time. So the next day is agnosia, and that's not recognizing objects or people, using a hairbrush for a toothbrush, or they might confuse a son or a father with a husband and daughter and mother, etc. And sometimes with the bathroom, there's anxiety, like, what should I do? When I get in the bathroom, they don't recognize the toilet. So there's a lot of increased agitation. And one lady I remember came in with me and she had the dental floss. And she said, I have this tool and I'm not sure what to do with it. And then she added, my mother doesn't like me if I don't use this. So the other thing is that people with dementia do, they'll confuse things. We had a gentleman one time that tried to take a bite out of one of those balloon weights because he thought it was a Hershey kiss. So being careful about what you have around the house is very important. And also, like we say, not recognizing objects. One lady came in the room one day and said, oh, I love your jewelry, and went out the door, and about 2 minutes later came back again and said, oh, you have that jewelry too. Someone else has that. Now, aphasia is the inability to use or understand the language. Sometimes people will replace one word for another. They might say the stuff you use to clean the dishes because they can't think of dish liquid. Or also they can't understand the spoken word. And expressive aphasia is when they can't make their wishes known, but receptive aphasia is when they cannot understand what you're saying and the communication is all garbled. So they're not sure exactly what you mean. And then the last A is apraxia. And sometimes you might see someone try to comb their hair with the opposite edge of the comb, the teeth facing up, things like that. They can't coordinate the purposeful movement, and it's because their brain doesn't tell the body how to do that. And this is when people also have the trouble to stay balanced, and this is the falls and the inability to use objects properly. So the next one is the field of vision. And might I add at this time that I do have a PowerPoint that can be sent to all of you too. The field of vision, it used to be thought that there was a 3-foot square of vision. And then the doctor said, well, maybe it's 12 to 18 inches at eye level. Well, now they're deciding that the field of vision is actually about a foot square. So think of a picture frame, okay? And 12 to 8 inches at eye level. So this is where there's confusion with a rug, a different texture on the floor. Think of all the different textures you use during the day, stepping onto the road or off of a curb. And as the vision wanes, different surfaces are not visible. So it's like a flat painting, and a person might go to 2D, or after a while it's only one-dimensional, like a picture. So think of that. There is no peripheral vision. A waxed floor may look shiny. It may look like water. And sometimes like a black rug. In the movie Still Alice, there was a black rug by the door and there was a mail slot, and she would not go to pick up the mail because she didn't want to fall into that hole, which was the rug in front of the door. Actually, I had met a lady who ended up, her husband kept leaving the bedroom at night to go wander around. And what she did was she put a small piece of black material in front of the door, and her husband stopped going out of the door at night because he didn't want to step into the hole. Yes, it may sound a little bit cruel, but also it is a way for the caregiver and the person they're caring for to be able to get some sleep. So think about this. Now, the depth and the distance perception, that's when you start to see people pick at something on the wall and think that it's 3D. If there's a picture with books, they may think that the book is movable. And with the 1D, remember too that it's not the eye that's damaged. This is the time many people get new glasses, and quite honestly, many times you're wasting your money on that because it's part of the brain that interprets what the organ does that is damaged. So it is not the eye itself. So I hope that helped some of you with the vision problems there. So next we'll talk about communication. The early, middle, and late symptoms can be very different for each individual. And how the communication skills are affected. In the early stage, communication skills would be questions like, did you get the mail? If the caregiver says, do you get the mail? The answer would be, no, I didn't get the mail. But if you ask that person, were there any bills in the mail? That may be a trigger to help them remember that they did get the mail and where the mail is. And at the early stage, a list of tasks to do, especially if you have it on the refrigerator, will help, and phone numbers. Keeping a calendar on the refrigerator, if they can still read, helps. This is the time in the early stages where people can be victims of scams. They might purchase too many lottery tickets, go into sweepstakes because the judgment is getting poor. They may give to charities that they wouldn't normally give to. I had a lady one time that bought a Time magazine and she renewed it up to year 2040. And the woman was 93 years old. So the chances of her still being alive are pretty slim, actually. So unless she were in the Guinness Book of World Records. So during the middle stage is when people start arguing about clothing. They might argue that they didn't wear those clothes before, that the clothes are clean. So the best thing to do for people during the middle stage is to put out their clothing and to put it out in the order that you put it on. Because sometimes if you leave everything there, and we've had this happen when I was working at Arden Courts, that a woman might be perfectly dressed, but she has her bra on outside of her clothing. And it's not unusual for that to happen. And labels for the bathroom will help at this time. Even a picture outside of the bathroom entryway, a picture of a toilet, has helped many of our residents before. And fluorescent tape on the floor from the entrance to the bathroom that leads right to the front of the toilet. And that helps also. At the middle stage, one thing we should not do is not to quiz, because asking someone what they had for supper, they either didn't eat or they will make up something if they cannot remember. We had a resident one time that his wife asked him what he had for breakfast. And he said, I had sausage and pancakes and home fries. And the wife called our place and she said, I feel so bad. All these years we were married and he never ate anything but oatmeal. And I said, well, he did have oatmeal this morning. And she said, well, I asked him, what did he have for breakfast? And I said, yes, ma'am. And he was looking at the table where the other residents were, and he saw what they were having. And so he was able to recall that, but to remember what he himself had eaten was totally impossible. Also, during the middle stage, the TV news is not a good idea. And a lot of times, this stage, people will say, well, I'm watching that. But really, it's just a background noise and company for them. Many times we have had a resident take the TV news personal. One lady whose husband had been a conductor on a train, there was news on about a train wreck in New York City, and that is where she used to live, and her dad was a conductor. So she was really worried that her father had been injured in the train wreck. And so putting the news on, although you may think will help, you'll find that they will watch the same story over and over, and you're going to be the one that says, oh my goodness, we've seen this already, but it is new to them. The doctors used to say that there were, I believe it was 9 or 11 different stages of Alzheimer's disease, and there was a huge chart about it. And then it went to 7, and now doctors pretty much will say early, middle, and late, because a lot of times the person with dementia, the stages can overlap with each other. Some person might not have trouble with vision like another person. Some person might have aphasia and another person doesn't. So it's very important to just stay in the moment, live in the moment, and welcome yourself into their world. I know that this is easier said than done, but it is very, very important. And this is the time too in the middle stage where a person really needs a newspaper, and they'll say to you, I need the paper. And you may come over to their house, say if you're the daughter, and gosh, the newspaper hasn't been touched. Well, that is a routine that still is needed for them. Perhaps for years they've gotten a newspaper, and so they need to know that the newspaper is still there. There is the continuity for them and their sense of routine. Now, the later stage, the communication skills are quite difficult. They may not know who you are. Sometimes you have to state your name, and sometimes, like we've had families who have had a little bit of a family reunion, and I suggested everyone wore name tags. And this one daughter had a name tag that said, I'm your favorite daughter. So that was humorous for the mom too. And she actually did not have that daughter as her favorite. It was someone else. So that was a joke with the daughters, but the mom was sort of in on it, but not really. So the idea here is to not set them up for failure. One time at a caregiver group, I remember one of the daughters said to me, I hate to admit that I like my mother the way she is now. She said, she's very pleasant and sweet. We have never gotten along. She was never physical as far as touch. And now she gives me kisses and she hugs me and tells me she loves me. And then how sad, but the daughter said, you know, I'll take that. You know, she had 2 other siblings and she was out of sorts with the rest of the family and her mom for many years. So approach technique. First of all, always with someone with dementia, approach from the front. As we said about the eye level, do not step onto someone right from the side or tap them on the shoulder, because you will always make them jump. There's also a 3-foot rule that you are away from someone, and that has to do with the eye level also. And ask permission for a hug prior to touching, and use familiar words and simple questions. There's no need to elaborate. And I had to learn this the hard way, because when I was an activity director, I didn't realize that you would say the same thing again, because sometimes with people with dementia, they might only hear about every 5th word. There's a few commercials on TV with that, where the girl actually goes to a party and she thinks it's a costume party because the girl said you don't need to wear a costume. And that's what she had heard, was dress up and costume. So it's very important to take your time. When I was an activity director, one time I told the residents it was time for lunch. And then I said, aren't you hungry? Don't you want something to eat? And then I told them to go left, right out the door. And that was confusing. And one lady, I walked her all the way down the hallway to lunch. And when I got back, this was my first day of work, I got back to my office, she was already sitting there right at my door because there was a shortcut that I did not know about. So she walked down the hallway with me to her lunch area. And then I'm sure she was just humoring me because we sang a song along the way. And by the time I got back to my office, she was already back there. So we had to start the whole process again. So keeping your sense of humor is very important. Don't use medical terminology in front of a resident or your loved one. It's very impersonal. I've heard people say before, well, like when I visited residents to assess them for appropriateness in a community, someone might say, well, she's got a UTI and the lab's coming by so we can get a CBC and we're going to get a UA on her. And it's just not fair to do because the resident doesn't know what you're talking about and it's kind of insulting for them. Don't try to make them hurry. And this is easier said than done if you have a doctor's appointment. One woman told me about her mom, and she woke her mom up, and it was a perfect morning. She helped her get dressed and said, we have to go to the doctor this morning, so I've made you breakfast. The mom came downstairs, ate her breakfast. She was fully dressed, and then she said, I think I need a sweater. So she went upstairs, and about 20 minutes later, the daughter went upstairs looking for her mom. Her mom had changed back into her bedclothes and was back in bed already. And the daughter had learned something. So instead of saying, what are you doing? We're going to be late. She just closed the door from outside and took 3 long, deep breaths and then came in and said, good morning, Mom. How are you doing today? We're going to get dressed to go to the doctor. They can't remember. So asking them to remember facts is very unfair. In fact, the word remember shouldn't even be in your vocabulary. Now you can say, I remember this, or I remember that, but don't ask the person to remember anything. And also, which I'm sure all of you who have ever done any caregiving know, don't tell the person what they cannot do. And don't talk down to them. Baby talk isn't good either. I have heard a lot of this, and many times when I go into communities, someone will say, oh, she likes it. And it's like, oh, you love my little baby. But you have to address them the way they would like to be addressed and not how you would like to address them. Many times we've had residents who want to be addressed by their maiden name. Doesn't set well with the husbands, but it does work as far as them recognizing that you are talking to them and you have that personal moment with them. And like I said, telling them what to do is one of those things that is everyone likes to do. You can't do this or you can't do that. And also talking about them with other family members while they're sitting there is not a good idea either. And I say it hesitantly like that because something like that is just plain good manners. You don't talk about someone when they're sitting right there. If you're still having difficulty with communication, remain calm, redirect, and respond to their emotion and not necessarily their words. Listen for a keyword that they have. And many times having someone else try to redirect them or to do something for them, or even trying again later. If it's time for the shower, try again later. Now, improving communication, strategies to redirect. If a person says, I already had a shower. Well, don't tell them that they didn't have a shower. They had one 3 days ago. It's been 3 days. They really need one today. One of the suggestions would be to help them pick out their clothes and say things like, I've already had the heat on in the bathroom. I know you like it warm. And have everything ready beforehand, so there's not this argument of going back and forth, because you can have that bathroom or that shower done in 10 minutes and you could argue for 40 minutes about it. Now, for those of you who are specific caregivers and perhaps not a family member, you know, there is that personal space that people have, and especially to touch. And many of these people with dementia, their mindset or age is about 12 years old, I would say, with many people in the middle stage. And, you know, at that age, their mom told them not to let anyone touch them in certain areas. So giving them a washcloth to cleanse themselves is good, because they know that their mom told them, don't let anyone do that. And that's what they remember. Now, sometimes people are in their teens, and I asked a lady one day how old she is, and she said, well, I think I'm about 17. And then the next day, she was looking for her mother. And a few minutes later, she came back and she said, you know, I think I'm pretty old, because I just saw myself in the mirror and I have a lot of wrinkles, which, you know, and she said, and I look kind of scary. My hair is gray. And so I think my mom might have died. And I said, yeah, she passed quite a few years ago. And she said, yes, that's what I thought. So at that moment, she had those moments of clarity, which does happen with people with dementia. Now, the next day, she was looking for her mom again. And I said, no, I haven't seen your mom. There's no reason to tell her that her mom has passed, because it can really, really bring up some bad memories for some. We had one resident who was in the hospital. Now, she had been at the facility that I worked at, and for almost 3 years, she was looking for her husband first thing in the morning. Where's my husband? And we would say, or I would say, well, you know, I'm not sure where he is. He probably already left for work. And she'd say, yeah, he always gets up early to go to work. Well, I may as well go join the ladies down in the community center. He's not here now. And that went on for quite a while, and she was very happy. The only time she asked for him was first thing in the morning. Well, she had had an accident and ended up going to the hospital, and the hospital called us that evening and said, how do you keep her calm? What do you give her for medication? Because she's freaking out and she's crying and she's all upset. She can't find her husband, and we keep reminding her that her husband is dead. So what medication do you give her? And I said, the only medication we have given her is her husband is probably at work. I said, the truth does not always help for people, especially in the middle stage. Now, what does help a lot is reminiscing. And for many, the old memories are the last to go. Good or bad, they are the last to go. And sometimes the memories themselves are not accurate, but that doesn't matter. It's the feeling that someone has about that memory and not necessarily the fact. We had one lady who had been in a tornado or close to it, and she said, I remember my mom was waving from the back door and we saw the cloud coming. And then she kept waiting for us to come in. And finally she said to stop. And she was yelling for us to go under the chicken coop. And this lady said, we went under the chicken coop, and you have not lived until you have smelled what it's like even under a chicken coop. So she remembered that odor, didn't necessarily remember all of the horror of the tornado or anything, but she remembers being under the chicken coop. And this woman also told us that Ronald Reagan had walked her to school in kindergarten. She was in a family of 14 and she was the youngest. And she told us none of the siblings would take her to school, but Ronald Reagan did. And of course we humored her and then found out a few weeks later that actually Ronald Reagan did walk her to kindergarten because he didn't mind at all. He really liked her and he was always kind to her. He didn't have any siblings her age. And so things like that, it was the truth. We kind of humored her and she said he used to talk politics with her dad and we humored her on that. And that was actually true too. So we had another resident that we tried to get to go to supper and he'd say, well, I can't because I have to feed the chickens and I need to feed the cows. And I would say, well, I believe someone already took care of that. And he'd say, well, I need to see for myself. So one of the caregivers would take him outside, out the door. And really by the time he got to his dining area, he didn't remember that he was going to feed the cows. He had a pleasant little walk and a chat with the caregiver, but that crisis was averted and there was no argument. Now, sometimes the reminiscing isn't necessarily good. When I had a program one day, we were talking about games that children play, and everybody was remembering hopscotch or whatever and playing ball. And one of the residents said, well, I was on the hill with my brother, and he started laughing. He said, and I was chasing him and he was chasing me and we were running down the hill. And when he got to the bottom of the hill, then he died. And the residents actually were very, very compassionate. And one of them said, oh, I'm so sorry. And then he started to cry. And what had happened was his brother had just come back from the war and the two of them were out on the golf course. And his brother did die on the golf course, had a heart attack the day he had come back. So I can't imagine what a horrific memory that was. And it started out pretty good, but then he remembered that. And he did appreciate the residents saying that they were sorry. And it was interesting because all of them were very compassionate about that. And then he smiled and appreciated that. And then a little while later, he stood up and said, I'd like to address the group. And he stood up and he thanked everyone for coming. So moments like that to me really touch my heart because it means that we are touching the lives of these people. And that's one of the very important things. Now, stimulating the senses, smell of baking bread is good, or kneading the bread. And we have to remember with any activity that you do that it is not the end product or not the end result, but it's the process itself. If you bake a loaf of bread and it's not edible, get a nice one from the store and pretend that that's the loaf of bread. It's the process and not the end result. So reconnecting with people, just enjoy the moment. Sometimes singing some silly songs and not saying things like, do you know the farmer in the dell? But how about, this is what my kids used to sing. There's the dignity factor. Rather than singing your ABCs, you might say, gosh, I remember teaching my kid their ABCs. And there's the dignity factor, as I say with that, because you're not embarrassing them and it's not talking baby talk. And many times talking while you're helping somebody clothe or unclothe takes away a lot of the anxiety, talking about yourself and empathizing with what they might be feeling. I remember one resident when I was at a community, they had a whirlpool bath and she was afraid that they were going to cook her in the soup. And I can't imagine what she was thinking about, but that's what she was afraid of, that she would be cooked in the soup. So the validation, this is another way, and I'll give an example of all three of them in a few moments, but validation is validating the feelings and not the facts. There was one resident that I worked with who kept crying that she needed her dress. And she had the dress in the closet. I came in and asked her where it was, and she said in the closet, and it's blue. And I looked in the closet and I couldn't find a blue dress. And I said, "What's it for?" And she said, "I'm supposed to wear it to the prom." And I said, "Oh, okay, well, tell me more about the dress." And then she started laughing and she said, "Never mind. My dad wouldn't let me wear it because it was too revealing. I bought it with my own money and my dad made me bring it back because it was too revealing." Well, in those days, it was probably not as revealing as what we know now that a lot of the kids wear. But for her, that was quite a memory that she worked through. And we talked about the fact that it's parents' responsibility to make sure their kids are appropriately dressed. And so that really hit home with me. There was another resident who had roomed with her sister, and her sister lived by the door and she lived by the window. And they were very close, talking to each other every day. Well, her sister passed, and that was a very difficult time for her. Well, what happened was the community, under my unadvisement, moved the woman to by the door because they felt that she could see people going by and that would keep her company. Well, what do you think? She felt like she was next. My sister was here and now she's gone, and now I'm here and I'm next in line. So that was very scary. And what made me really get into this business even more was there was one lady that I said to her, "I'll be back." I had gotten a call that I had to pick up one of the kids at school. And she said, "No, you won't be back. They all leave." And I said, "No, I promise. Look at the clock. I'll be back at 4 o'clock and we'll play a game together." And she said, "Everyone leaves. You're never coming back." Well, I was in a car accident. I had to take my son to the doctor's office in a car accident, totaled my car, ended up going to the hospital. Well, I didn't go back. I had a lot of rehab, physical rehab and things like that. And I always felt bad about that. And from then on, I never did promise someone that I would definitely be back at a certain time, because life doesn't always work like that. And then, of course, there was one lady, one last one, who she used to call me Rose. And I did look similar to her daughter. And she kept calling me Rose. And I'd say, "Well, my name is Nancy." "No, you're Rose." So one day I said to her, "I look like Rose, don't I? I look like your daughter, Rose." And she said, "Oh, no, honey. Rose is much prettier than you are. So don't give yourself a compliment." That's the other thing. So reality orientation, when I first started working in the business, that was the norm. You had a board up in the corner of the room that told people what the date was, what the season was, what day of the week, what was next on the calendar. And you tried to get people to conform to what the present day was. And that worked for a while, but you know, like I had told you before about the lady whose husband had passed away. Why would you keep telling someone that their husband had passed away? Why would she have to relive that death again? Now, the third example of all of this would be feeding the fantasy. And that's where you might say, if someone's looking for their mother, "Oh, well, she's on her way. She'll be here in a few minutes." And that was that lady Nan that I talked about that finally said, I don't think my mother's alive anymore because I'm pretty old here. So I'll give an example. If someone said, I have to get home to fix supper for my husband. Okay, reality, which may work for some, would be, oh, well, your husband passed away years ago. You live here now. We cook your meals and you've been here for 3 years. So the benefit of that would be that they didn't have to worry about getting supper, but the drawback would be that they would be re-mourning the death of her husband. Now that might get her increased anxiety, and then she might start an argument of, well, I don't live here. My husband dropped me off here when he went to work, and I have to get the 6 o'clock train, and you're lying. The next one, feeding the fantasy, would be, oh, I'm sure your husband can fix his own supper tonight. He'll be fine. Don't worry about it. Stay here with us and he can fix his own dinner and you can take the later train. There's one at 8 o'clock. Wait here and the train will be here soon. Well, that lady may sit on that bench in the lobby for 4 hours waiting for the train. And that is cruel in itself, to let someone think that and not have to deal with the real problem. So validation therapy would be taking them by the hand, always asking first and saying, well, what kind of foods did your husband like to eat? Do you enjoy cooking? What's your favorite thing to cook? There you have the reminiscing. What did you used to cook for your husband? And 90% of the time, if you give 2 choices, they will pick the second one. So keep that in mind with just about anything. So what we need to remember here is home is not really a place, but it is a feeling, okay? That feeling when you're about 10 years old and you are with your parents in the living room and there's a light in every corner and you are sitting there and you are safe and it's twilight and you see the shadows, but you're not afraid because your parents are there. So this is the time sometimes when some of our caregivers would say, like the Muppets, they'd be talking, oh, there she is, yakking away. I'd be in the middle of an activity and they'd say, I can't wait to get home and get out of this place. And I'd say, you know, I can hear you. It was always a little bit awkward. And they'd say, oh, okay. Well, then I'd have ones that say, your hair looks nice. It looks a lot better than it did the other day. And one lady was crying and I said, well, let me get my guitar and maybe after supper we'll play a song and I can sing for you. And she said, oh, for the love of God, please no. So I've had residents ask me when my baby's due. Well, I'm not having a baby, okay? And one time someone had their skirt tucked into their shorts and the lady called her a hussy and told her she just wanted people looking at her legs. I have a banjo and one gentleman who had been a music teacher told me, don't try to sing when you're playing that, just play the strings and you might want to practice before you get up in front of the group again. So I'm going to talk now about some of the specifics. And then if we have time, I do have some information about sundowning, which I know a lot of people have problems with their loved one. So the main thing to remember with a person with dementia is that they are a person with dementia. There'll always be a part of that individual that wants to help and participate and succeed in whatever it is they do. Now, one lady did tell me that her husband was in the garage one day and she was kind of relieved that he was keeping himself busy. Well, she went out to the trash can and there was her artificial Christmas tree. It had been cut up into little pieces, no more than a foot long. So when her husband came out of the garage, he said, yeah, I took care of getting rid of that Christmas tree for you. And Learning what she had learned, she said, "Thank you so much. That's a big help." So one of the things is people need to be needed. So always focus on the person, but not the disease itself. And you'll be tempted to find projects that take into account their lost abilities, but always focus on the person. Even if they don't remember the activity, the joy that they feel from taking part, big or small, can leave a positive impact. Even things like if it's warm and you need a fan on, Scotch tape some strips of tissue paper on the fan and have it blow, and talk about things like playing outside and having the breeze blowing. Things like that can really, really help an individual. We did that one day, and we used actually red and yellow paper, and everyone thought we were having a campfire. So what the reason activities help is, although it won't slow the progression of the disease, it does improve the quality of life. And games and housework activities really can lessen the agitation and depression. And it can help that person maintain motor skills, skills that aid them, like buttoning a shirt, even if it's on a doll for one of the grandchildren, buttoning a shirt, or recognizing different household projects, projects that match the skill level and give them a sense of ownership and independence. Now, I did have one lady I talked to one day, and I said, "What can your sister do?" She said, "She can't do anything right." I said, "How about loading the dishwasher?" She said, "She doesn't do it right. And then I have to do it all over again, so it's not worth it." And I said, "Where is your sister when you're reloading it?" And she said, "She's just sitting at the table watching me." So I'm sure all of you can guess what I had said at that time. Let your sister load the dishwasher. What difference does it make? So when she's in bed, go and reload the dishwasher. It is worth it. For your sister to feel kind of demeaned by you undoing and then redoing all the work that she had done. So activities can relieve your frustration and keep your loved ones stimulated and keep an emotional connection with them. And sometimes their self-expression with things like folding baby clothes, putting them in the laundry basket. When I worked at the community, I always had a laundry basket of baby clothes, and I used to wash them with that Downy fabric softener, so they smelled really nice. And there was one lady, every day I'd put the new basket out, and she'd say to somebody, "Gosh, these babies use a lot of laundry." I know, in fact, yeah, I know I folded these yesterday, and there they are again with another load of clothes. Can't anybody do anything for these babies besides me? But she was willing to do that every day, grudgingly, but so creating meaningful activities, it's not about just filling the day with busy work. Try for something that your loved one used to do and still enjoy. Assess their skills. Like, can they sort objects by size or by color? Can they button shirts and zip up jackets? Can they follow written commands? Many times people can still follow written commands, even though they may not understand what you're saying to them. So make the project sometimes less challenging or more challenging to fit their skills. You want them to feel a sense of accomplishment and not failure. And so you need to adapt as necessary. Creating games that are based on their interests or past interests, equipment based on the name of a sport or famous sports celebrities. Many of our residents were very, very interested in people that they already knew. I remember doing a biography on Betty Davis and Ingrid Bergman, because they do remember those people. They won't necessarily even remember, well, Elvis they'll remember, everybody remembers Elvis, but somebody from a few years ago, they may not remember, but they will remember those people and they can associate with that. One lady actually had met Elvis, so that was pretty cool when we did that one. So those lives of actors and actresses can be very interesting. And sometimes even typing up the biography in very large font, with 28 font is typical, and black and white, white paper, black ink is the best for people with dementia. You know, pink on green doesn't help because the colors all meld together. So you need to make the activities failure free. And encourage a sense of success, like having them straighten the drawers, and keeping crowds and noise to a minimum for them, giving verbal and visual instructions. And if they'll accept it, sometimes you can guide their arm or their hand gently as you interact with them or show them, but always ask permission. Avoid small objects that might be swallowed or confused with others. I know for a fact that it's not good to have a snack of potato chips and then play bingo, because we used poker chips for bingo and then had a heck of a time trying to get the bingo chip out of a resident's mouth. They had just finished the potato chips. So keep that in mind. And the best time of the day for activities, you know, sometimes people have more energy in the morning and then you could go for a walk, or sometimes in the afternoon, and repeating their favorite activities is always a plus too. And don't ask someone, do you want to color? Do you want to color? Well, no, they don't want to color, but they can help you finish those pictures for the grandkids or for the neighbors' kids. They can work with clay. There's a lot of very good adult coloring books out there, and colored pencils are better than the crayons, and there's a lot of choices for those. So keep the work area safe and use unbreakable plastic, obviously. And sometimes they get bored within 5 minutes, so be ready to change to a different activity. And simplifying old hobbies, a lot of people used to do crossword puzzles, and you can get simple crossword puzzles or jigsaw puzzles with large pieces and not babyish ones, not you know, My Little Pony or things like that. There's some very, very good ones that are out there that are reminiscent of the 50s with just 24 pieces. There's one that's a soda shop that's from the 50s, one that's a gas station that I've seen. And those are very entertaining and they spark the memories. Making your own puzzles, just cut up a picture in a magazine, sometimes put cardboard behind it and cut it up a simple way that it can be put back together. Gardening helps for some people, and basic tasks like sweeping the floor or raking, those fulfill your loved one's sense of community and sense of being helpful. And just make sure with the plants that they're non-toxic. The raised beds are a lot easier for that. And you know, people with dementia, now that they have the dementia, they aren't as critical about themselves. They won't judge themselves as much, and they may find their inner artist. We've had a lot of people do some beautiful drawings with just colored pencils and things like that, or paints, because they are more comfortable with it. And like I say, the age bracket that they're working with themselves is a little bit different. Sometimes typing up words to a prayer and then maybe sorting it out, separating it for reordering for them, shuffling the words around a little bit. That may help with some. Reading together, take turns reading out loud, or sometimes reading to a grandchild is pretty cool, even on the Zoom. Cleaning up and wiping off the table. Yes, they may leave the crumbs on the floor. You can get them later. Sometimes just holding the trash bag open as you fill it up. Remember, it's process, not the end result. So collecting toys and wrapping them and taking to a shelter or an orphanage. Reminiscing is very good. And when you reminisce with someone, if you have reminiscent activities that they were involved in when they were younger and you were younger, say what you remember. Don't ask them if they remember, but like children, many times it really works if they'll say, oh, Mom, I remember the day you took us to the playground when we were real little and you brought sandwiches for us. It helps to start off with that than saying, do you remember? And TV is not necessarily all that bad. Some of the Andy Griffith shows, things like that. Red Skelton is pretty funny. Even some people object to it, but oh gosh, what is that? The 4 or 5 ladies there. Golden Girls, a lot of the residents like that. It can get a little bit inappropriate depending on the residents, but most of ours still enjoyed a good joke. And singing with a group, or if someone plays a piano, you can do that. And pets themselves obviously give unconditional love. So conveying their needs in a way that to everyone, they are loved, and especially with dementia residents. Now, you do have to be careful. I used to bring one of my dogs many years ago, and my dog started to be afraid to go there, and it was because one lady was hugging him, but way too hard, squishing his belly, you know, and I felt so bad for the animal especially. And so we did get some stuffed animals, and there's some that are motorized, and you should see how some of the residents can talk to them. It's not a cruel thing. And it's very important, like I say, that they get that satisfaction. So as I said before, there will be a handout with many activities that I've compiled, and there'll be a list of them that will be available for you. I have just about maybe 6 minutes, so I'd like to briefly talk about sundowning. A lot of people will say, oh yeah, they have sundowners. Well, it's sundowning itself has been studied for over 60 years, and it's been investigated in several research groups, and it does have to do with the change of light in the afternoon. Now there's new bulbs called daylight bulbs that I'm sure you've seen. Those really help in the house to put those like in the corner of a room. Getting the person outdoors during the day is good. It's a good switch for that. And sundowning itself, sometimes I use the word switch. There was a lady that during the day, she would be fine all day, and about 4:30, she was wandering looking for her babies or her parents, and the other lady looking for her mother. That was the time of day. And residents have this anxiety and fear and a lot of disorientation. They can be verbally abusive sometimes, and they want to go home. And as I've said before, home isn't necessarily a place, but it's that feeling. So the risk factors, obviously, they're fatigued mentally and physically. Sometimes they have a disruption of nighttime sleep, and they're hungry and thirsty this time of day, and the light is diminishing, so that can be scary. And that dementia-related language and sight problems too, as we talked about. And in a community, sometimes the lower number of evening and night shift staff is frightening for people, or the lessened availability of the caregivers. There's a shift change, and they have wondered now where all of their friends have gone. So one thing to do is make sure that you have changing light for the room. Turn on different lights. Make sure that the hearing aids are working properly. Make sure their glasses are clean, and make sure that they have up-to-date glasses. As we said, sometimes that's not necessarily the factor. But with sundowning, there's a balance between activity and inactivity during the day. And right before sundowning, avoid too demanding complex or lengthy tasks or anything that would make them stressed out. Limiting activities and trips from families, it's best to do that in the morning when the person is generally a little bit more relaxed. Quiet, relaxing activities like reading or listening to music is better for the afternoon. And encouraging a nap is okay, not more than 30 minutes, but just before their sundowning time. Now, some do have the sundowning at about 3 o'clock, and some it's later on, but it does have to do with the outdoor sunlight. And the jobs like pushing a fellow resident in a wheelchair is helpful, or delivering snacks, something that makes them important and needed. And there's a lady by the name of Gerdner. She's from the University of Arkansas, and she suggests that a half hour of listening to the person's favorite songs, not our favorite songs, but their favorite songs, about 30 minutes before the episode of agitation reaches the peak level. And that really, really helps the person with dementia. You know, sometimes hand massage or aromatherapy. So in mastering all of this communication, I say what are the 3 P's, and that is patience, which means no tapping your fingers, no big sighs, but think about the movie Finding Nemo and the fish that kept saying, just keep swimming, just keep swimming. The P is persistence, the other P. You can say, forget it. Let's try that later. And practice. Sometimes our approach isn't the best. And we can say, I'm sorry. As I said, that doesn't mean you're taking full responsibility for it. Doesn't mean it's all your fault. It means, I'm sorry I've upset you. I'm sorry you're scared. Let me try that again. And so the last thing I'm going to share is maybe 3 of these rules for a good life. And those are on my papers for the presentation too. And it's, if I get dementia, I don't want to be treated like a child. Talk to me like the adult that I am. If I get dementia, I want my friends and family to embrace my reality. If I think my spouse is still alive, or if I think we're visiting my parents for dinner, let me believe those things, because I'll be much happier for it. And the last one is, if I get dementia, make sure there's plenty of snacks. This is kind of me talking, but snacks for me in the house. Even now, if I don't eat, I get angry. And if I have dementia, I may have trouble explaining what it is that I need. And as I say, the last one is, if I get dementia, do not feel guilty if you can't care for me 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. It's not your fault, and you've done your best. Find someone who can help you, or choose a great new place for me to live. and make sure you visit me often. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you so much, Nancy. We so appreciate all of your expertise. You know, your many years of being an activity director really shine through in all of that great information and experience. Nancy, we got a handful of questions for you.
Okay.
First of all, you talked about the early, middle, and late stages of dementia. One of our attendees says new to caregiving and wondered if you could explain when early, middle, and late happen.
There are some charts online. I don't have the chart with me right at this moment. And actually, I think it was on a Tam Cummings website. There's a chart that shows exactly the early, middle, and late. And I can certainly actually send that in with my presentation. But typically, it varies, but typically the first stage, early stage, lasts for a few years. However, that could have been going on for 5 years, but the person is very adept at hiding that and saving face by, using visual cues or auditory clues that they've heard from someone else to help them. The middle stage is maybe, I would say, about 6 years. And then the last stage is usually, or the later stage is usually 2 to 5 years. And the end stage, of course, is not long at all. But I will send that in with my other notes. I do have that chart. I just don't have it in front of me. I'll be glad to do that.
Fantastic. And for those of you joining us today, we're going to send you a PDF of Nancy's slides. She's having a little tech issues on her side, so we're going to send you all of her slides. And we are also going to send you the handout that she has. And those of you who are watching this on YouTube, if you just look down below in the comment, the details info, we're going to have links to those so you can click and access those. You were talking about having a schedule as something that can be very helpful. And at what point or what stage of dementia is it having a schedule not really as helpful? At what point do we start realizing that someone is not able to adhere to a schedule?
That's a very good question. And it does vary with each individual, but I wouldn't say that try to keep a schedule mostly for yourself as long as you can, but without impacting exactly what the resident is able to do or is not able to do. So that things like, let them sleep in the morning. If they're still tired and you have nowhere to go, they don't have to get up at 7:30 for their breakfast. So they sleep till 10. Perhaps you can go back to bed, have a nice nap, have a cup of coffee on your own. There's nothing wrong with that at all. I would say the tough part is that you want to try to keep that bedtime schedule consistent, because there are a lot of residents or people with dementia that do wander at night. And we have had cases of people that we know of, and stories that of people that have come into our community that were out in the middle of the night with a shotgun in their nightgown, going to shoot at the caregiver, the private sitter, and they called the person here in Austin, all the way from Bishop. It's like, I can't get there. So they should not have let her sleep all day long. And perhaps the caregiver was like, oh, let her sleep, she's tired. So things like that, we've had residents come in who had been wandering. One resident that we had at our community had wandered into the neighbor's house, which was a carbon copy building of theirs. And he got in bed with the 6-year-old of the family, but it looked just like his house. Luckily, the neighbors were understanding, but that wandering is very scary. And I do have a presentation on wandering. I didn't talk that much about it, but there is a pretty good presentation about wandering and what to do about that. So a brief answer I would say then is it does depend on the resident, but try to keep a schedule enough so that feed them when they're hungry, and it doesn't matter if they graze during the day, that's okay too, but just make sure that they get a good night's sleep so that you can get a good night's sleep.
We've got another attendee this morning who says that her mother is blind and unable to walk, but they're dealing with sundowning issues. And so with her limitations of not being able to see and not being ambulatory, are there any suggestions on how they can address her sundowning?
I would say, we had a resident who was completely blind, and she did very well. She was not ambulatory. She could push herself around in the wheelchair. I'm not sure that your mom can, but one of the things is those books on tape. There's very good books for, and I can't remember exactly. I know the library has some, but there's different communities that do have a lot of those books on tape. And I would say, even working with her, saying, when this story is over, we're going to have breakfast or lunch. They need some stimulation. And if there's no, I know if she can hear, there's nice, so perhaps break up the day between music and perhaps books on tape, or something sensory that she can do, working with clay, or if she used to crochet before, many times they can still do the movements of crochet or knitting, something like that.
And you had noticed music is always a great way of helping someone. So maybe playing some of their favorite songs can help them to calm as well. Another question for someone who their mom is in late stage of Parkinson's.
Oof,
and so very limited on her abilities physically and cognitively. Says that we used to do all kinds of activities with her, reading together, puzzles, games, dancing, folding clothes, talking with friends. But right now, about all she can do is sing, and we're struggling to find additional activities that she can participate in. So any suggestions on things for someone, again, who is limited on their physical abilities?
Well, I would say there's nothing wrong with singing through just about anything during the day. We did have some residents that we got them, there's these new dolls. If you don't have a problem with giving your mom a baby to hold, there's very good dolls that they have now that are very realistic. The skin is realistic. And for her to be able to just love someone and hold that baby who moves a little bit, or the stuffed animals that are, some of them bark, some of them will whine if you just touch their ear a little bit. Some of the, dogs that they have. You can also get one of those, or make it yourself, but a lap apron, or an apron that you can wear that has different textures on it. Not quite like as hard as sandpaper, but perhaps different textures like velour or soft satin or cotton, something that she can touch and get that sensory stimulation, because that's obviously what she's missing, and that's why at least she can still hear and sing. So.
And also, there are lots of fidget blankets and fidget activity tools that are very tactile as well.
Right, and those are very good. And some of the residents had those too, and we had bought some that we would put on the table. But depending on your budget, you can really make something that's pretty simple for them to use, that you can make at home if your budget is limited. That's kind of why I said those things too, yeah.
Right, and you were talking about earlier about simple puzzles and large print books. And Age of Central Texas has 2 Thrive Social and Wellness Centers for older adults to have activities during the day. And
Nice.
we use the dollar store very
Yes.
often because they have a lot of great materials and activities that are not specifically childish, and a lot of large print word finds and those kinds of things. And our members really enjoy having those as activities. So
Yes.
dollar store can be a great friend for you as a caregiver.
Yes, yes. And the best Alzheimer's products, that's a website, and they have quite a few different things that are very good for people with dementia too, and some nice puzzles and things like that. And that's where I had done my exercise video, which is all sing-along videos, and it tells you what to do. Actually, I was just thinking about that woman who sings all the time. She could sing along with that whole thing and perhaps do the exercises, or some of them move her feet, but perhaps not. So it's, you know, you have to do what works for you and the resident themselves too.
Right. Got time for just a couple more questions. One is that any insight on whether a person living with dementia can tell you when they're hungry or not, especially as they're getting into the later stages and they're not able to communicate their feelings as well? Are there any good clues or triggers to let you know when they're hungry, or if they have wet themselves, or there's something going on there that they can't express?
Well, as far as being soiled, it's a good rule to check every 2 hours, regardless of whether they seem uncomfortable or not. 2 hours is typically the limit of leaving someone to check to see if they've soiled themselves. As far as the eating, many times just putting your hand up to your mouth, as pretending like, here I am moving my hands, and I know I'm not on the video, so, but moving your hands like you're holding a fork, you know, almost like the sign language. Are you hungry? That works with a lot of residents. Or offering something, every few hours, and see if they do want that, or if they just refuse it, is good. But, you know, no more, I would say, than 4 hours to go without having something to eat, and especially fluids, to always have some fluids available for them. And don't limit fluids just because they might soil themselves.
Yeah, yesterday's presentation with Sarah Hyde-Williams, she talked about communication with your loved one who has cognitive issues. She went through a whole session on the I'm sorry, which you mentioned earlier, Nancy. So she also had mentioned that a lot of times that your care recipient will mimic a lot of the things that you do. And so if you show them on yourself, like, we need to change your shirt. So you demonstrate, I'm going to pull up my shirt, or, are you hungry? And make it point to them and demonstrate, so that, it's the nonverbal that most people say. One of her points yesterday was that we hear 10% of the verbal, but we identify 90% of the nonverbal. And so the nonverbal actions and the way that we present to our person who doesn't have the ability to respond to us completely is much more effective. One last quick question for you. We talked about reminiscing quite a bit. For someone who is new to this caregiving journey with their loved one who's living with dementia, how do you get started in reminiscing? How do you just kind of kick that off with someone?
I would say if you're a personal caregiver, find, if it's a family member, find some photos or some old photograph books or something that your mom might have. That's a very good way to reminisce, and to start, maybe those have you in it. So you could say, I remember this. And sometimes they will be able to talk about that, especially if you bring up about the food. We had this for dinner and it was so good, or things like that really help. Old photographs. There are some very good reminiscing books, and sometimes believe it or not, even just looking through a magazine might trigger something for you or for them, like a picture of the baby, like, oh, mom, that looks just like me, doesn't it? And the mom might laugh because it's a baby that's not even the same gender or has all curly hair or something like that. So that's a good way to start, is with magazines and pictures.
That's fantastic. You know, as you noted, it's the process. It's not the end result.
Yes,
And
very
so
good.
it's just doing it and see what works. Of course, every person's journey is different. And so some things may work for you, some may not. But we hope that, Nancy, thank you so much, because it's been so much wonderful information that
Thank
I
you.
think that all of us have found something that we can take today and we can utilize. So really, really appreciate all that
thank
you have shared with us.
Thank you
And
so much.
And thank you for joining us today at home. We appreciate you being with us. I know that there were some folks that had their loved ones with them today joining us. And so we appreciate you taking the time out of your caregiving journey to share with us. And we hope that we brought you some great information. For those joining us live today, we're going to be sending you the PowerPoint and Nancy's materials. And for those who are watching this video on YouTube, there'll be links to it right down below. We thank you again for joining us. We'll be back again this afternoon with our 4th session of the 20th Anniversary Caregiver Conference. And then tomorrow we'll conclude with 2 more incredible sessions, including a caregiver roundtable. And then Bob Stevens, who is the Vice President of AARP, is going to join us in the afternoon. And we're going to talk about what is the future of caregiving. So we thank you for joining us. Hope you have a great rest of your day, and we will see you later on. Have a wonderful day.